think you'd do the trade. I think, you know, again, with any of these things, I guess it depends what you mean by detailed analysis. I mean, you should do analysis. But I think, you know, that's a common enough one that I think, you know, you wouldn't see like a necessarily crazy amount of research, I guess. But if it was something, you know, that was a more unusual bet, I don't know what that is offhand, you know, then I imagine you need to do a lot more.
Is that the only reason that you would expect to see overhedging?
Let's think. Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, so for example, I mean, we might overhedge if we had some uncertainty, you know, in that cash flow stream. So again, you know, you're entering into a forward, right? So it's not, I mean, obviously it's not riskless, but you know, you can, but you know, if you overhedge, right, like, you know, you might end up, you can win also. So it's, you know, it's different from an option, say. So I think like, but you might overhedge. Like, let's say, you know, you thought that those expenses were volatile, and you know, you were concerned about having exposure, you know, not being 100% covered, right? Then in that event, you would overhedge as well, right? So it's also, you know, it's also potential volatility in the underlying thing you're trying to hedge, as well as, you know, the fact that you're dealing with imperfect correlation.
So if there's uncertainty in the underlying amount that you're trying to hedge, and you think that it may be more than you originally expected, then that might be a reason that you overhedge.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So this is different from, you know, earlier we talked about, you know, hedging, like, you know, I own $100 million of bonds or something, and you know, it's in a, you know, alternate currency or currency I don't like, or you know, whatever it is, or whatever. You know, so in that case, you kind of have, you know, you have some certainty in what you're trying to hedge. But you know, if I'm a corporation, you know, or a private equity investor or whatever, you know, and especially if you're dealing with, like some of the companies we own, like a sort of a pulp mill, you know, on Vancouver Island. And I mean, you know, you've got, you know, one year you're like zero revenue, and the next year you're, you know, several million in revenue, and the next year you might be tens of million in revenue, and the next year you might be back down, you know. So when you're dealing with something like that, you may, you know, you do your best estimate, and this is maybe going along the lines of, you know, the question you asked earlier about like how much analysis. So in a case like that, you know, you're gonna really try to do good analysis and understand, okay, you know, what does my expense stream look like, that I'm trying to hedge, or, you know, whatever revenue stream or whatever I'm trying to hedge. And in that event, you're going to try to, you know, you're trying to get that down, and then you may overhedge, right? In that sort of situation. So like today, right, we might have a very small profit and loss statement, but, you know, in a year's time, that's going to be very different. So if I'm buying a hedge now, and I'm sort of unclear about, you know, when, how this is going to trend, you know, I may open with something that looks overhedged, but, you know, the assumption is that I'm actually going to, you know, that's actually going to be roughly the right amount.
Okay.
In time. Yeah.